Today's topic is going to be about the decline of Virtus.Pro in 2017. And for those who don't know, Virtus.Pro is one of the most legendary lineups in CSGO, the longest standing lineup in any esport. The five-man lineup consisting of Snacks, Pasha, Bialy, Taz, and Neo has stuck together since the very beginning of CSGO, and they've always been a competitor. They've had their ups and downs, but it's always been believed up until this year that they could always find their way back up, no matter what kind of difficulties they had gone through. And what I wanted to talk about was, I guess you could call it like the metaphorical death of Virtus.Pro this year in 2017, because they've basically slowly been on the decline and they're almost comatose now, and what caused it. So, I'll go back to one iteration ago, or I guess that would be like 2 seasons ago, back in at the very end of 2016. At the very end of 2016, in the fall, Virtus.Pro had risen up greatly in form. I'd say their fall run was very good, and it was predicated on both because it was the uncertainty era and because their own form had come back to the fore, and Neo had become the in-game leader during that time. At the same time, Neo was playing the best game of his career in CS:GO, where he was winning off of his intelligence, off of his smarts. The impact he was giving was winning those clutches, winning those retakes, winning those post plants, winning small man situations, stuff like this. It wasn't a normal playmaker role, but those critical rounds obviously pushed Virtus.Pro over the edge, especially with Snacks going off as one of the best players in the world at the time. So and then later on you would have like Taz still had impact as an entry fragger. Bialy was Bialy, like either super inconsistent or it's always super inconsistent. You never know when he shows up. And then Pasha was having a hard time. And then you go into 2017, and then they are considered one of the two best teams in the world, along with Astralis, and they play Astralis in the E-League Major, and it was an incredible series, one of the best we've seen. At the same time, it was a finals where people often state that Virtus.Pro should have won, just because they were up rounds in the final game, and it looked like they were about to close it out, except Astralis clutched it out over them, right? So, and then you go to Las Vegas, they have a rematch against Astralis in the semifinals, and they beat Astralis there, and then they take the tournament. And at this point, a lot of people were thinking, okay, Virtus.Pro is the best team in the world. Fuck it, we're just gonna give them the title. But that never came to fruition, obviously because it's Virtus.Pro. And then we go into IEM Katowice, and this is where a lot of people think the slump starts. I actually don't think that. I actually think IEM Katowice is I think it's in form, or it's in, how do I say this? It's typical of Virtus.Pro to lose in this fashion. Okay, so what I mean by that is prior to the 2017 slump that I think comes afterward, this particular tournament, Virtus.Pro lost for a few reasons, but the biggest one was obviously the map pick phase, where they kept picking the best maps of their opponents, and then they eventually lost in the group stages 2-3 in the Swiss system. And I actually feel like they were hard done by in this particular Swiss system, just because I think they were better than what the result appeared. And then if you look at the games themselves, they were always very close. They were always competitive. This was the typical Virtus.Pro loss, or even if they lost, you didn't feel like they played badly. But this was also in March of 2017, and the reason I'm denoting the time is because March of 2017 is still when Neo was in-game leading, and then Snacks takes it up at April, and this is where the critical shift happens. From Starladder Kiev, I think it was Starladder Kiev was the next one. They bomb out of that. They bomb out of every online tournament. They bomb out of ESL Cologne, I believe. They win Adrenaline Cyber League, ACL, but that was like a weird land just because there were so many technical issues, and apparently the atmosphere there wasn't very good. I think Blade said something like they went there to get LAN experience, but they ended up getting nothing just because of how weird the LAN was. I'm not exactly sure what that meant, but that's kind of the feeling I got, as in it wasn't like a very serious LAN, or it wasn't one that could be, or like it was riddled with so many problems that it didn't feel like a real LAN to them. And I imagine some level of that went to the other teams as well that went to that LAN. They go to DreamHack Mamo, bomb out of there. Actually, in between, they go to Krakow Major, and this is their one like good result throughout this 2017 slump. But it has to be said, I picked against them, and I still think they could have lost in the group stages at Krakow Major if they didn't get Vega round 1, and if they got like harder draws. So, for instance, if they got like G2's draws, I think they're out. Like, I think if you switch G2 and Virtus.Pro, the draws they get, I think G2 goes on to the playoffs, and Virtus.Pro drops out of the entire thing. They go to Malmo, drop out of there. They go to Mykonos. They make it out of the group stages, beating Team Liquid in like a best of 1, I believe. But then they lose to SK in like the semifinals, so that was okay. And then they go to ESL New York, and then they lose to Team Liquid. So I have to say, over the entire span of it, it's been I'd say it's been an unmitigated disaster, and you have to ask yourself what exactly causes a mitigated disaster, because if you find out what caused it, you might be able to figure out how to resurrect this lineup, so to speak. So just in terms of gameplay, what happened during this time, I'd say among the 5 players, three of them had terrible form. Snacks had terrible form, Neo had terrible form, Taz had terrible form. Bialy was still Bialy, as in he's always consistent, or he's always like inconsistent, but sometimes he's good, sometimes he's bad, and I don't feel like he was particularly worse during this entire period. I actually felt he was a bit better, or I felt he was just better overall compared to where he was before that. Pasha, you have to say, was a star player for this team for a long period of time. I feel like he was like their best player for a long period of time, but the problem was if you just have Pasha and Bialy, if you just look at the impact kills they're getting together, so for instance, Pasha is the main opper, he's going to get opening picks on the T side and CT side, and he's good at holding a site. So you have that, and then you have Bialy, who is good at holding a site and good at maybe getting a multi kill if he goes in second or third into a hit, right, or maybe first in. So that's what you're getting, but on the other end of the equation, Taz is a free kill, Neo is a free kill, Snacks has removed, and this is usually fine, the two of them being like free kills ish, because they do other things. They used to do other things in the server that like help the team, but the essential problem was Snacks. And Snacks, basically, if he is a player that should be fighting for the best in the world right now. That's how good he was during that early 2017 period to late 2016 period. He's a player that is similar to Nico in that he can do everything, and he has impact in every aspect of the game. So he's great at opening rounds on both sides, CT side and T side. He's great at breaking open a site in the hit. He's great at defending a site in the hit. He's great at post plant situations. He's great at clutches. He's great at retakes. He's great at like these small man chaos situations. He was great at all of these different things. But the essential problem with Snacks was he was moved to in-game leadership roles, so he broke his own style. He broke his own style when he moved to the in-game leadership role, because for most players, it's very hard to keep that form up while in-game leading at the same time, because you're basically splitting your mental resources in half, or even more than that, because it depends on the team, but you might be splitting it for like 6 ways: your own game, your own player's game, and the enemy opponent's game, right? So that's basically why Snacks went to hell. And you can't really blame Snacks, because you can, but here's how I'd put it. If you just look at the tactics within the game, and if you assume that Snacks was the primary had the primary responsibility of creating these tactics, in just in a pure tactical sense, Virtus.Pro was fine. In a pure tactical sense, where the X's and O's, I think Virtus.Pro was fine. I don't think they were particularly bad. I don't think their meta was outdated. I actually think they were innovating things. I think they were getting in new smokes. I think they were getting in new tactics. They're trying to counter what the enemy teams were doing to them. All that was fine. So what exactly broke down? I feel like team play broke down, and the fact that if you accept the fact that Snacks has to be your in-game leader for whatever reason, that must mean that then you must also accept the responsibility that you must other players must perform in his stead. So when you look at Gambit from the Krakow Major to Gambit at DreamHack Malmo, when Adren becomes in-game leader, every other player has to accept that they must take some load off of what Adren did before that, because Adren was an MVP level player. He was their best player for a long period, for the entirety of 2017. So when he decides he has to become in-game leader, that means the new guy, Fitch, Hobbit, Mo, Doja, they all have to step up, and they all did. Whereas in Virtus.Pro, Pasha was better, Bialy was better, but Neo and Taz went to hell, and I'd argue they were even worse than they were before. Like, way worse than they were before. Like, at the very beginning of 2017 to 2016, like, there were maps, there were sides, there were, like, positions where the two of them could, like, still impact the game. None of that existed after Snacks took over as in-game leader. And the reason I even made this video was because there have been a bunch of interviews coming out, like, from Neo, and then Snacks did that Facebook post. But basically, there's a lot of conflicting information about what exactly happened during the period of the in-game leader swap. Like, I read an interview from Neo basically saying, oh, Snacks wanted to do it, and I was kind of burned out, so I let him do it. Whereas Snacks is like, no, Neo burned out, and I was the only one willing to do it. I don't really care about whose responsibility it was. I'll say this. When you look at Virtus.Pro, if you just look at the ages, if you just look at the experience, I feel like there are three clear leadership figures within this team that have a deciding role as to how the identity of the team goes forward. That's Taz, that's Neo, and that's Cuban. The fact that all three of them let Snacks become in-game leader when Snacks is by far their best player, Snacks is by far one of the best players in the world, that's on them. They are the ones who basically killed Virtus.Pro in 2017. They are the ones who led them into the slump because they let Snacks ruin his own game to become in-game leader. And neither Taz nor Neo stepped up to fill that gap, that gigantic gap that Snacks was basically carrying them through. So you have to blame them for the most of it. I will say that I'm not exactly sure what Snacks was thinking when he decided to take up the in-game leadership role. Because in hindsight, he might be like, oh, that was bullshit. I didn't want to do it. But maybe he did want to do it. Maybe this was like an MSL pimp situation. I don't really know. But he has to take some responsibility in the sense that he should have rejected it immediately. He should have realized he was the carry of the team. But there are like weird internal politics going on with like ESF Force, Virtus.Pro, and the fact that only like Taz got the car. So maybe it was like, you know that story about Vegas where like when Virtus.Pro won, like Taz gets the Mercedes, but then for some reason like nobody else gets a Mercedes. So I assume there's like some level of favoritism. So maybe it was just Taz telling him he had to do it, and Snacks maybe was thinking, I guess I have no choice because like what am I gonna do here, right? So that's basically why I think Virtus.Pro died. Taz, Neo, Cuban, they let Snacks take up the in-game leadership role, and it's even worse just because both Neo and Taz have been in-game leaders in the past, and they were willing to let him take the role. That's really weird. Like Neo explains it as like since we're sticking together for a long period of time, we don't really know how the configuration of the team will go forward. So it's important for somebody like Snacks to get that in-game leadership experience. I will say I can understand the point a bit, but I think like there are certain fixed roles in this team that have to go forward that will always stay the same. And I feel like Snacks being the primary carry, being one of your main two stars, will always be one of those roles, and you don't want one of your primary stars to be the in-game leader. That just doesn't make sense. I feel like long after Taz and Neo have retired, whatever the hell that is, Snacks will still be one of the great players of CS:GO history. So, and he'll still keep playing. He'll still keep getting to those finals. He'll still keep getting those championships. Whereas those guys are on the edge, and it feels much more sane to have them do the in-game leadership role. Having said all of this, after ESL New York, it's been revealed that basically the in-game leadership role is changing now. They're giving it back to Taz, I think. I think Taz is taking it up. And I feel like this is actually like 5 months too late. So, for instance, like 5 months too late. Like, for instance, let's say, for instance, if I did agree with Neo's perspective, we need, maybe one day Snacks will have to in-game lead. In that case, let's get him some experience. Fair enough. After it fails like 1 or 2 times, you have to switch. You have to switch. Like, obviously it's not working. He was your best player, he was your best player in 2017. And if you don't switch, what happens is he starts losing the feel for his own game. He starts losing the feel for his own style, and that will eventually, like, that's just going to hurt you in the long run. Like, there's no guarantee he's going to be able to get back to that form instantly when he switches out of the in-game leadership role. It might take months. And are we just going to wait around for months again? It's like, is this going to be a thing where we wait around for like 1.5 years for Virtus.Pro to be good again? Like, what? And there's no guarantee Virtus.Pro will be good again either. So the entire thing is such a fucking mess. So will there be life after death, so to speak, for this Virtus.Pro roster? It's gonna depend upon Snacks again. I feel like just in terms of tactics they were fine, but obviously the team coordination was off, and then Snacks has to be the superstar player if they want to go anywhere. At the same time, you have to point out the fact that the only reason he has to be a superstar player is because Neo and Taz are so bad right now. If they even had like a modicum of impact, Snacks could have gotten away with just not having as much impact as he used to, but that's not the case, and I don't believe. Put it this way: Snacks is in the worst slump of his career, right? He is playing some of the worst CS I've ever seen from him. But I have more belief that Snacks can become one of the best players in the world again than I do for Taz or Neo becoming okay. So I feel like it's, unfortunately for Snacks, it's not really his fault, but it's gonna be on him to carry this team out of the hole if they make it out of that hole. So those are my thoughts. See you later.